I heard like horns beeping and my mom was screaming.
The world fell out from under me.
To me, it was a simple, honest-to-God accident.
This is a Fox 13 News special report, Small Town Justice. Here's investigative reporter Doug Smith.
Every day, drivers die on the road, but sometimes a crash is more than just an accident, it's a crime. During the next half hour, we'll take an in-depth look at a fatal wreck that cost a mother and her daughter their lives. A small town mourns, then cries out for justice. A truck driver lands in prison. But did the punishment fit the crime, and was there even a crime at all? Wauchula isn't the kind of town you just stumble upon by accident. Way off the beaten path, square in the middle of our state, a picture of small-town America, a place built around family, faith, and football.
The Wildcats have taken over.
And it was a Friday night more than 5 years ago that tested the faith of one family. Just a few miles down the road, an accident this community would never forgive. Nona Moore, who had grown up in Wauchula, was driving home with her 3 daughters. Nona Moore's sisters remember the night they got the call.
But there's been a terrible accident.
When we got out there finally and parked, it looked like daylight because there were so many floodlights out there. There were, I don't know, 100 people.
The driver of a truck loaded with tomatoes lost control, crossed the center line, and rolled on top of the family van.
And I was sleeping until we got here, and then I heard like horns beeping and going crazy horns, and my mom was screaming. The last thing I remember was her saying, "Jesus help us, we're gonna crash."
Thanks to quick work by paramedics, 2 of the girls, Haley and Ashley, survived. But Nona Moore and her 8-year-old daughter, Lindsay, died at the scene. 2 crosses marked the spot. A family and a town were left heartbroken.
I think the community, they lost 2 precious people that they loved, and they felt like someone had to pay.
That someone? This man, the truck driver, Jean-Claude Muse, an outsider, an immigrant from Haiti. Prosecutors filed charges, 2 counts of vehicular homicide.
We were in disbelief.
Rebecca Chenoweth is engaged to marry Jean-Claude Muse.
You know, we thought that they would at least see that it was an accident. There was no justification in it.
So what convinced investigators that this was more than just a tragic accident, that the trucker's actions were criminal? He wasn't on drugs, he hadn't been drinking, and he wasn't speeding. They say hours after the wreck, he fell asleep in the back of a patrol car and concluded he must have fallen asleep at the wheel.
All rise.
The truck driver was tried in Wauchula's small county courthouse. The verdict? Guilty. The sentence? 15 years in a maximum security prison. Almost unheard of for simply falling asleep at the wheel.
There are people who have had DUI manslaughter and not got the time he got. I mean, literally drunk, killed lots of people, and did not get that kind of time.
Time for a crime built on one simple argument. The trucker was running on too little sleep. But is that what really happened that Friday night?
Were you tired? Did you fall asleep?
No, I do not fall asleep.
And the trucker has never changed his story. He says the accident happened because a white car cut him off. He swerved to avoid a crash, but lost control and tipped over on the Moore's van.
I was the one called the police. I was there. I don't leave the scene.
Muse says he was not sleepy at all, just disoriented and confused after hitting his head on the windshield. He says he had slept 10 hours before the wreck and has the paperwork to back it up.
I wasn't doing anything reckless. That caused the accident.
Should the man who was driving the truck that killed your sister and killed your niece be sitting in prison?
No.
No? Really?
Absolutely not. An accident is an accident.
Nona Moore's sisters are convinced Jean-Claude Muse did not fall asleep, but they say there was no way for him to get a fair trial in Wauchula because emotions were running high.
I heard people were high-fiving each other as they were doing jury selection.
Why? Why do you suppose that is?
I think they wanted to burn him.
Court records show 4 of the 6 jurors had read about the accident in the local paper. It took the all-white jury less than an hour to reach a guilty verdict. Did they carefully consider all the evidence or make up their minds in advance? We found the jurors.
But we're trying to talk with some of the jurors about the accident.
Nobody really wanted to talk, but one juror reluctantly agreed if we didn't show her face.
Did the prosecution prove that he was asleep?
No, I don't think so.
How in turn did the jury decide to convict him of that?
Because he was the driver and there were 2 dead people. I feel bad that it was an accident, that he's having to serve 15 years for an accident, plus live with it in his heart.
They had to channel their anger somewhere, but I believe they truly meant well, but they didn't think of the consequence or how severe it might be for him, for John Claude.
Inmate H17740 is an educated man who speaks 5 languages, and he's now having to learn how to survive in prison, while his fiancée and Nona Moore's sisters fight for his freedom, writing letters to the state attorney, making phone calls, but nobody wants to hear it.
They pretty much told me to stop calling.
We wanted to talk with someone from the state attorney's office about the case, but nobody here would talk with us. The prosecutor said the court records speak for themselves. The sisters say Nona would not want Jean-Claude Muse here in prison, and his deep sorrow over the accident is punishment enough.
Yeah, it's very emotional. You see somebody lose their life. It's something you cannot change.
And the girls who survived the wreck, how do they feel?
You forgive him?
Yes, I forgive him.
Despite all that's happened, Jean-Claude Muse, who's lived in the United States more than 20 years, has not lost hope.
This is the best country in the world. People can look and see justice, they can see injustice. Somebody would step up and help me.
And somebody would step up and try to help.
Me and my buddy were the first ones here.
Up next, a story the jury never heard.
The first order of business for any crime scene investigator is to find and interview potential witnesses. But that night in Wauchula, investigators with the Florida Highway Patrol never interviewed the first person on the scene.
We come around the curve and I told him, I said, oh my God, look at that. Me and my buddy were the first ones here.
A semi-trailer loaded with tomatoes had crushed a van. Juan Otero will never forget that Friday night, when he and his friend, who were both experienced volunteer firefighters, just happened to be driving by seconds after the wreck and called it in.
Told him we had a signal for 7 Mile Point, tractor trailer overturned on a van with entrapment.
Otero watched Jean-Claude Muse climb out of his cab.
He asked if there was anything that he could do, and there wasn't nothing that nobody could do, because we had to get the truck unloaded to be able to bring a crane in to pick the truck up.
Did he seem alert when he got out?
Most definitely, he was alert.
Juan Otero decided to come forward and tell his story after seeing our stories.
Yeah, it's very emotional. You see somebody lose their life.
I wish I would have done it sooner. Could have made a big difference in the jurors' decisions. It could have made a big difference in a lot of things.
That's because the jury never heard his story, the way he sees what happened that Friday night 5 years ago.
If you're dead asleep on that right there, look how sharp that curve is. Watch that car. Okay? Dead asleep, you'd come right through here. You wouldn't have tried to make that curve.
But nobody bothered to ask him if Muse looked or acted tired. Did you talk with investigators?
They never asked me nothing.
Surprised?
Surprised, yes. Because you're talking about sending a man to prison for so many years on an accident.
It's the first lesson in traffic accident investigation, found in the basic training manual used all over the country. Check the scene for actual or potential witnesses. But none of the FHP investigators interviewed Otero or his friend, even though they stayed for hours to help unload the truck and could easily have been tracked down later at the Hardy County Fire Station. And there's more. Sergeant Owen Keene, the lead investigator who put together the evidence against Muse, went to high school with Nona Moore. We wanted to talk with him, but Sergeant Keene, who's appeared many times on TV, did not respond to our repeated requests for an interview.
What happens if I get behind the wheel and someone cuts me off and I hit somebody else head on? Am I going to go to prison for an accident? I don't think it's right.
And it also didn't seem right to black pastors in the Bay Area.
Amen. I prayerfully hope that the community will speak with one voice and try to bring justice to a situation of injustice.
They held a prayer vigil after seeing our stories, and it didn't seem right to the NAACP either.
He still ended up with a 15-year sentence after being found guilty by an all-white jury.
Flanked by Muse's new attorney, the Tampa Bay chapters called for action in the case.
Well, given all the new evidence that you have uncovered, I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever that this man should not be in prison, that trial was not fair and just.
Up next, what's wrong with this picture?
Their own diagram doesn't stand up to the physical evidence.
Did this diagram of the accident give the jury the wrong impression?
This simple diagram drawn by FHP helped convince the jury that Jean-Claude Muse fell asleep at the wheel. But does it accurately depict what happened on the road that night? May 11, 2001, 7 miles outside of Wauchula. This diagram maps out the scene that night. It convinced jurors that Muse did more than just cause a terrible accident. By falling asleep at the wheel, he committed a crime. And this very same evidence, the FHP trooper's diagram, is what Muse believes could now get him out of prison.
That this diagram do not match the scene.
And he's not alone.
Their own diagram doesn't stand up to the physical evidence.
Wiley Howe is a traffic reconstruction expert with more than 25 years experience, who we asked to look at the case. He took all the physical evidence directly from the FHP report, the very same pictures and measurements, and did a full-scale reconstruction. Howe says it proves the FHP diagram, which showed Muse running straight off the road the way someone would if he were asleep, was all wrong. The way that your flags are set up, you can see that he started to negotiate the turn there. It's not a straight line.
No.
Which tells you what?
He was awake. He was actually reacting to something else that was in the roadway.
Howe's opinion lines up with what Muse has been saying from the beginning, that another driver veered into his lane, forcing him off the road. Using an aerial picture of the scene, we put together animation of what Howe says happened next. To avoid an accident, Muse left the road, but fought to keep control of his truck, steering just barely off the pavement.
And he's actually already starting to navigate the arc prior to even leaving the road.
Muse then crossed State Road 64, his truck jackknifed, and his trailer turned over on a second vehicle, a van driven by Nona Moore, killing her and her daughter Lindsay. It's the story FHP records show he told troopers when they first interviewed him at the scene that night.
This physical evidence here, you have a person that was not asleep.
No doubt about it.
No doubt about it.
A story Wiley Howe says FHP's own evidence proves, but you wouldn't know it looking at this diagram. Did the lead investigator for FHP get it wrong? Well, it turns out this key piece of evidence, the diagram, was never intended to be 100% accurate. This diagram is just an approximation.
That's correct.
That's right. This diagram, drawn by Corporal Owen Keene, is not to scale. It doesn't precisely match the measurements FHP took at the scene. FHP wouldn't let us interview Corporal Keene and instead gave us spokesman Doug Dodson. With 2 people dead, a truck driver looking at hard time in prison, don't you think a scale diagram is essential?
Not necessarily. No, I do not. I mean, you don't necessarily need a scale drawing to prove what happened. I mean,
You're comfortable with what you have?
Most definitely.
Really?
Yes.
The diagram is very, very deceiving. It's not to scale. It's not correct So it gives you the illusion that this person, if you wanted to say he was asleep, it'd be easy to convince somebody he was asleep.
Like a jury.
Like a jury.
Corporal Keene went to high school with Nona Moore. Did that affect the way he drew the diagram?
Absolutely not. I mean, let's face it, we've done these cases time and time again, and I think I told you this before. We take this very seriously.
And so did the FHP troop commander, Rebecca Tharp. Fox 13 obtained emails Tharp sent after seeing our stories, asking for a team of experts to take a second look at the evidence and reconstruct the accident. This is what they put together. Our expert was shocked at how little work went into it. A larger diagram using all the same old information and the same conclusion.
Why doesn't FHP see it the way you do?
They don't want to approach whether he was asleep or not.
They don't want to know the truth?
Apparently they don't want to know the truth.
You think this is a rubber stamp?
This is nothing but a rubber stamp.
So what does the troop commander think? The one that wanted a complete reconstruction? 3 weeks after she wrote the email, Rebecca Tharp, a 26-year employee, was fired. Tharp told us there's a lot she'd like to say, but can't talk while she considers her legal options. FHP told us her termination had nothing to do with the Muse case. Up next.
Was race a factor?
Definitely not.
But we uncovered a remarkably similar case, and this time the truck driver was white. Square in the middle of the state, 2 fatal accidents just 16 miles apart. One near Wauchula, another near Sebring. You've heard about what happened in Wauchula, the accident involving Jean-Claude Muse. And now we've uncovered a remarkably similar case. Thomas Smith, driving his big rig through Sebring, caused a fiery, horrific crash. And the people who saw it say they will never forget that day.
All of the cars were stopped, just like they are over there right now, and the truck just plowed through them.
Nancy Henry was on her lunch break. The medical assistant was an eyewitness to the surreal events at this busy intersection on US 27.
One of the cars burst into flames?
Yes, it flipped over on its back, and it burst into flames, and then the flames were inside of the car. One lady kneeled down and started praying, because it just looked like a war over there.
Trapped inside this car, 82-year-old Benny Smith, who later died. The drivers in these cars survived. The man at fault? This truck driver from Georgia, according to the FHP report. He told everyone at the scene he fell asleep at the wheel.
Did it appear that the driver made any attempt to slow down or stop?
No, there was no screeching of any tires like someone was slamming on the brakes.
To witnesses, it looked like a clear case of someone falling asleep at the wheel. But that's not the way investigators saw it. Maybe it's because the Florida Highway Patrol didn't send a homicide investigator out to the scene that day. In fact, these photos were taken 2 days after the crash. And even though Thomas Smith said he fell asleep, FHP decided not to go after criminal charges. In the end, Thomas Smith got a traffic ticket.
In this case, the most you could do was a traffic ticket?
A careless driving ticket, which is an infraction under Florida law. That's correct.
The entire investigation was wrapped up in 1 month.
But here in Wauchula, investigators spent 13 months building a case against Jean-Claude Muse.
Unlike the Sebring case, a homicide investigator arrived at the Muse accident that same night. And the same FHP supervisors who determined that Thomas Smith deserved just a traffic ticket signed off on criminal charges against Muse, 2 counts of vehicular homicide for falling asleep at the wheel.
We've got a Haitian truck driver, and we've got a truck driver from Georgia who was Caucasian. Was race a factor?
Definitely not. Definitely not.
FHP investigated both cases at the same time during 2002 and came to completely different conclusions.
Why, if the same people look at these, one gets sent on to the state attorney for criminal prosecution and the other just results in a traffic ticket?
You've asked me to basically try to compare these cases. There are some similarities to what they're not the same.
FHP points to mechanical problems and bad tires on Muse's truck. issues that were thrown out at trial. On Smith's truck, we found similar problems and bald tires. So we took a closer look at the drivers and uncovered this important difference. The night of the Wauchula crash, Jean-Claude Muse volunteered to take a blood test which showed he had no drugs or alcohol in his system. Thomas Smith was never tested, but 8 months earlier, court records show he was convicted of drunk driving in Bainbridge, Georgia. His blood alcohol level, 0.22, almost 3 times the legal limit.
One guy gets a traffic ticket. One guy goes to prison for 15 years. Is FHP comfortable with the outcome in both these cases?
Most definitely.
But Nona Moore's sisters are not comfortable with the outcome.
Do you feel a growing sense of frustration?
Yes.
Yes, very much. Extremely frustrated.
We first started talking a year ago. We sat here in prison. Is it hard to believe that you're still here?
It's very hard. Inmates, staff, everybody. Every time they see me, they say, "You still here?" They say, "You'll be going home. You shouldn't be here."
Every time Jean-Claude Muse has gone to court in Hardy County, he's lost. Now his future depends on the 2nd District Court of Appeal, a new court in a new county that will consider all of the information that we've uncovered because the investigative stories that you've just seen are part of his legal appeal. The truck driver hopes that a new look at this information that sent him to prison this time will set him free. I'm Doug Smith. Thanks for watching.
Muse's attorney, John Trevina, used all the evidence that we uncovered, Wiley Howe, the flawed diagram, and the new witness, Juan Otero, as the basis for a new appeal.
Obviously, this is an adversarial proceeding. The court's concerned more with the search for the truth.
Do you think about the day that you'll walk out?
Yes. The day I walk out, it'll be a nice day. Maybe you'll be here.
Oh, you know we will.
I appreciate that.
And this time, in the same Wauchula courtroom where the jury found him guilty, a judge threw out his conviction and set him free.
Oh, baby.
All right. I love you, baby.
How does it feel, though? You're free.
Yeah, I feel good. There's a lot of good people in Wauchula. I don't want people to think it's all bad people here.
You hugged me, but I think there's some people that you probably want to hug over there, huh?
Exactly. That's what I was looking for. Yes.
The sun has set 1,000 times since Jean-Claude Muse went to prison. He never stopped believing that one day he would watch it rise again as a free man.
Here to accept the silver baton for WTVT Tampa is reporter Doug Smith. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's quite an honor to stand up here tonight. This story that we call Small Town Justice came to us as a plea for help. We thought, that didn't seem right. 15 years for an accident, no drugs, no alcohol, he wasn't speeding. So we decided we were going to take a closer look at this story. And the more we looked at it, the more convinced we became that Jean-Claude Muse did not deserve to be in prison. The story really struck a chord with viewers because they said, this could happen to me. Anybody can have an accident. What would happen if I went to prison? Would somebody fight for me? We were just inundated with emails, and I want to share part of one from a high school teacher who wrote, "Your report was compelling and heartbreaking, and I believe it would greatly benefit my students to see this example of how our justice system occasionally fails, especially with regard to race. My 10th graders are presently reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and while watching your report, I was struck by the parallels between Mr. Muse's story and the novel. And it was emails like this that pushed us to dig deeper. And then the victim's family came forward and they said they didn't want him in prison, but nobody would listen. And really, our unit was their only hope at that point. It's one thing to know you're right. It's another to show you're right. But to prove you're right in court without DNA evidence, that's a hard fight to win. And it was a hard fight. A hard fight with the Florida Highway Patrol to turn over diagrams and pictures. A fight with prosecutors who wanted to keep documents buried.
a fight even with the judge who called our reporting sensationalized. His ruling was overturned. We put 23 stories on the air over 2.5 years. Investigative reporting is tough. We're not making music videos, so we can't script or predict the outcome. And along the way, you meet a lot of what I call truth-challenged people. Jean-Claude Muse told the truth. We showed his story to thousands. That's the power of television. And in the end, the system which failed him, this time worked and set him free. I thank God that I've been put in a position to help people. It's my job, but it's also my privilege, and I'm privileged to work with a lot of great people. First of all, I have to thank my wife, and then I'm going to thank the rest of our team. And there's only 3 of us. Thank you, Debbie. There's only 3 of us. There's producer Lisa Blegan, and there's photographer Craig Davison. They were both so important to this story. They were both so smart, so talented. Phil Metlin, former news director, who pushed so hard for this story. Mike McLean, the news director, who came in, gave us everything we needed. Bill Schneider, our general manager, and Carolyn Forrest, our attorney, who was such an encourager. If these people hadn't done what they did, Jean-Claude Muse would not be free today. He would be locked up in prison. All the people that I just mentioned are here tonight to share in this award, and I'm so happy. Because if we had not done what we did, Jean-Claude Muse would be looking at another 10 years behind bars. Instead, he's here with us tonight. Jean-Claude Muse. Fight for what's right. Thank you. Thank you, jurors.